Hello and welcome to our Winter Spotter training. My name is Joe Moore and I'll be taking you through this training. I am the warning coordination meteorologist for our office. That means that I do a lot of the external outreach and education efforts for the office. I've worked at our office for about 6 years. 5 of those years I was a forecaster, and for the past year I've been our warning coordination meteorologist. Previously to this, I worked at our Goodland, Kansas office and at our headquarters office in Silver Spring, Maryland, and I'm originally from the Philadelphia area. There are a couple of handout documents that go along with this presentation, and I encourage you to check out those handout documents. I have the link in the description below this video that'll have some more information about things that you'll learn in this presentation, as well as some links to websites that we'll talk about today. A little bit about our National Weather Service office. We're a dedicated team of about 20 staff, about 16 of whom are meteorologists, and we're focused on Northeast Minnesota, Northwest Wisconsin, and Western Lake Superior. This area in white on the map is where we cover. We have neighboring offices to the west, Grand Forks. Down to the south is the Twin Cities or Chanhassen, Minnesota office. The La Crosse office in Wisconsin. Green Bay covers Northeast Wisconsin. And then the Marquette, Michigan office covers much of the UP of Michigan, as well as most of Lake Superior. We're locally staffed 24/7, 365. And in addition to the public weather forecasts and warnings that we'll talk about in this presentation, we also do some special services for the marine, fire, aviation, and other sectors. In this presentation, we're going to go through about 5 sections. First will just be a little brief overview of what is winter like in the Northland. Next, we'll go on to some winter weather safety tips. We'll talk about the science of winter weather. We'll talk about measuring and reporting different kinds of winter weather like snow and ice. And then lastly, we'll talk about how to get the latest forecast, including some cool experimental forecast tools that you can use to stay ahead of the storm. So what is winter like in the Northland? It is snowy. Here in Duluth, we see about 86.1 inches each season, though across the region it does vary. Out in Brainerd, they tend to see about 40 to 50 inches of snow each year, as opposed to up north in International Falls, it's about 71 inches. In Hayward, Wisconsin, it's about 55 inches. And then as you go across the parts of northern Wisconsin and then into the UP of Michigan, the snowfall amounts increase, where places like Ironwood can see nearly 150 inches of snow in a season. Winter is also pretty cold. Most of the winter we tend to see high temperatures of 32 degrees or below. We tend to spend most of the winter below freezing. And we also tend to see some pretty cold nights. Nights that we get down to 20 below or colder. We see about 6 of those here in Duluth, though up in International Falls, they tend to see a few more. They see about 18 nights where they get down to 20 below or colder. A little bit about winter weather safety. Before the storm, you should prepare your home. Make sure that you're ready for living about 3 days off the grid in case of a major winter storm. This is something that you can do now before there's any winter storm in the forecast so that you're ready when a storm does strike. This includes having things like making sure you have 3 days worth of food and water. Food that you can eat without needing to heat it up in case you don't have a way to heat it up. And when a storm is coming up, you should ensure that your supplies are stocked up. This means things like making sure if you have a portable battery charger for your cell phone, making sure that it gets charged up, making sure that you have enough supplies in your first aid kit, and if you require any medications, making sure that you have enough medication to last through the storm, and getting a refill if you don't. In your vehicle, if you have to venture in winter weather, it's a good idea to make sure you're prepared in case you are stranded. This might include things like having water and snacks in your vehicle, and maybe throwing a blanket in your vehicle just in case you get stuck. It's also a great idea if you need to travel in the wintertime, making sure that you have a full tank of gas. During the storm, the best thing you can do is just stay put. The fewer cars that are on the road means that our roads get cleared faster. In your home, be careful with any alternate heat sources like a wood fire stove. They can be a major contributing factor in home fires. This is also a great reminder to let you know to make sure that you check your smoke and carbon monoxide detectors. A lot of times you might put fresh batteries in, but it might still be beeping. That's happened to me in the past. Not all of these smoke and carbon monoxide detectors do have expiration dates. They tend to only last for about 10 years. So when you're checking the batteries on them, make sure on the back of it that they're not expired or they're not going to expire soon so that they can work all winter for you. Again, stay put during the winter storm. These are some images from the 2019 Thanksgiving blizzard that we had here in Duluth. It was not enjoyable out on the road. And if you do not need to be out there, you should not travel in the middle of a winter storm. After the storm is over, take it easy. Make sure that you take frequent breaks and stay hydrated. Stay warm and dry, and be neighborly. Check up on your neighbors, give them a helping hand, make sure that everybody's doing okay. One of the risks in the wintertime is hypothermia, which is having an abnormally low body temperature. Many people can be at risk for this, including older adults that might not have access to adequate food, clothing, or heating, babies that could be sleeping in a cold bedroom, or those that are just outdoors for long periods of time, such as people that are homeless, people that are outdoors hiking, hunting, anything like that. And when you drink or use drugs, you can also be at risk for this because you might not realize that you're suffering from hypothermia. Some of the warning signs of hypothermia include confusion, shivering, difficulty speaking, sleepiness, and stiff muscles. If you see someone that has these signs, make sure that they get appropriate medical attention. Hypothermia is a real risk in the Northland. We might think that, yeah, we deal with the cold, it's not a big deal, but this is something that really does affect people, and especially older Americans. These are statistics from the CDC, and it shows the cold-related death rate is highest in older Americans. You can see down here this little pink bar all the way at the bottom is storm-related deaths. While there's not much of an age variation when it comes to thunderstorm-related deaths, when it comes to heat and cold, older Americans tend to be the most vulnerable. And this is not just some itty-bitty statistics. Here in Minnesota and Wisconsin, adding them both up, for the latest year available, which is 2018, there were 60 deaths, 60 people that died from hypothermia in Minnesota and Wisconsin. So if there's extreme cold, if you see people that are being outside for a really long time, check on them, check on your neighbors, check on your family, make sure that if someone's suffering from hypothermia that they can get help immediately. Frostbite is another risk that we face in the winter. While frostbite is certainly not as serious as hypothermia, it's certainly not something that anyone is going to be immune from. Frostbite can lead to the loss of feeling and color in your skin, along with permanent damage to the body. Some signs of frostbite include a white or grayish yellow skin feeling unusually firm or waxy, or just numbness. Now, if you think that you have frostbite or someone has frostbite, it's usually okay to do an e-visit with your medical provider or go to a walk-in clinic. However, if you see someone that has hypothermia, especially if you measure anyone's body temperature that gets below 95 degrees, it's really important that they get medical attention immediately. Often someone that's suffering from hypothermia might not realize it, and they might need you to help them get help. All right, so 5 tips to stay safe in the winter. Number 1, wear appropriate clothing. Layers are going to be best, and cover your head and hands. It's really important too that you stay dry. When you get wet, it can increase your risk of hypothermia. Number 2, make sure that you're ready for living 3 days off the grid anytime. This is good advice, summer or winter. If you notice any signs of frostbite or hypothermia, make sure you take action immediately. And again, check on your neighbors. Number 4, stay tuned to the latest forecast. It will change. We're constantly working on updating the forecast and making it better. So there's going to be changes when there's a forecast. Make sure that you know where to find the latest forecast information, and we'll help you with some resources later on in this presentation. Finally, when a winter storm is happening, stay put. If you don't need to go anywhere, it's better for you to just wait it out wherever you are. All right, let's talk about some winter weather science. So this might remind you of some middle school or high school meteorology, but meteorologists classify different air masses across the globe into these different categories. Typically in the winter, we have a continental polar air mass. That's a cold and dry air mass. It's not as cold as an Arctic air mass. You'll often hear the term, Arctic air in the area. It's not as cold as Arctic air, but it's still pretty cold, and it's also very dry. Because it's dry, we need some source of moisture in order for us to get snow. So this can happen in 2 different ways. Sometimes we get storms that come out of the west. These might be in the form of clippers, which I'll talk about in a second, or they could just come from west to east across the Rockies. Those storms would get moisture from what we call the maritime polar air mass. So it gets the moisture from the Pacific Ocean, brings it up over the Rockies and into the Midwest. Other times, we can also see snowfall, and in fact, some of the heaviest snowfall amounts, when we can tap into the Gulf of Mexico moisture. the maritime tropical air mass that sits over the Gulf of Mexico. If we have a storm track that comes out of the south to some degree, it can usually pick up some of this richer moisture and bring it up to the Midwest and produce higher snowfall amounts. So I kind of just covered this, but kind of the two big winter storm tracks that we deal with here in the Northland, in northeast Minnesota and northwest Wisconsin, are clippers, which are typically come out of the northwest or west. They're pretty common. They usually lead to light snowfall amounts, 2 to 4 inches, maybe 3 to 5. And then when they leave, they typically leave off to the east or to the south, and behind them comes more cold, dry air. And that cold, dry air going across Lake Superior usually leads to some lingering lake effect snow on the South Shore. A panhandle hook or a Colorado low storm has its origins somewhere across the Panhandle region, across the Four Corners region, or maybe even down across Texas. This kind of a storm track can bring the potential for higher snowfall amounts by tapping into that warm, moist air of the Gulf of Mexico. That can also lead to the concern for mixed precipitation types, and I'll talk about different precipitation types in a minute. An example of kind of a Colorado low track would be the 2019 post-Thanksgiving blizzard that we had. We had 21.7 inches of snow in Duluth, and this was a pretty typical low-pressure track. This low was really deep. It was a pretty strong storm, and that's partially why we saw such high snowfall amounts. Another reason why is because it had a pretty slow track, and not incredibly slow, but it was slow enough that we were in a sustained easterly flow, so winds coming around the low pressure across the lake, enhancing snowfall amounts across western Lake Superior. Another famous storm that brought some extreme snowfall amounts to Duluth was the 1991 Halloween blizzard. This storm brought over 36 inches of snow to Duluth, and this was more of a true hook storm. So you can see the track of this low pressure, it actually almost started in the Gulf of Mexico. So it had some really deep, rich moisture with it. And that's part of the reason, in addition to its rapid deepening as it approached Lake Superior, why we saw such high snowfall amounts from this storm. So looking forward to this winter, you might hear of the terms El Nino and La Nina. What these refer to are, it's an ocean-atmosphere connection between the temperature of the water of the Pacific Ocean along the equator and the jet stream. And so when the water along the equator is cooler than normal, we call it a La Nina. And when it's warmer than normal, we call it an El Nino. This change in water temperature affects the jet stream, and then that affects where weather patterns set up across the entire winter. This winter strongly favors a La Nina. Generally, what this means for us is that we're going to see a blocking high pressure develop between Hawaii and Alaska, and this will lead to generally a variable but pretty typical northwest flow for our storms. We're going to see an increase in storminess, so generally we'll see more storms, more chances for precipitation than we might normally have in a non-La Nina winter. This might mean more snow, but not always, and I'll explain that in a second. This also can lead to increased frequency of significant cold air outbreaks, but it might not mean sustained long periods of very cold temperatures. So it might mean that 1 or 2 days we see some extremely cold temperatures, and then they warm up, they moderate. To the right here is a graph put together by a table put together by one of our meteorologists, looking back at past winters that we had La Nina for Duluth and what our temperatures, precipitation, and snow looked like. You can see that generally 3 out of the 5 saw temperatures that were below normal, but 2 were actually above normal. Precipitation-wise, most of the time La Ninas see above normal precipitation, but you'll notice that not every winter that was a La Nina had above normal snow. So what that might mean is sometimes in the winter we might see more precipitation, but that precipitation might come in the form of wet snow or mixed precipitation. So we might not see any above normal snowfall amounts, so we might end up just being about average for snow. So this is the official outlook as of October 15th, and this will change. The forecast does get updated by the Climate Prediction Center as we go through winter. But right now we're thinking temperatures, there's an equal chance for having above or below normal temperatures. Now that might not sound like we're saying much, but generally with a La Nina, we might end up averaging out to near normal. It might end up being above, might end up being below. Generally, though, with La Nina, we will see shots of Arctic air. We're going to see periods where we get 1, 2, 3 days of really cold temperatures, maybe near record-breaking cold temperatures. But when you average out the whole season, every single day, it might average out to below, above, or maybe right around normal. So not a really strong signal in that. Precipitation, though, is a little bit of a different story. We're pretty confident that we're going to see above normal precipitation amounts. Now, that doesn't mean more snow. It could just mean we get more wet snow events. And I'll talk about wet snow in a second. So different types of precipitation can be influenced by the temperature in the atmosphere. Now, when we have temperatures that are below freezing all through the atmospheric column, so you can imagine if you could go thousands of feet above your head, if it's all below freezing, then it's going to be snow. However, if there is warm air aloft, or if there's warm air at the surface, so if it's 40 degrees, it's going to be rain. And so that snow comes down, it goes through a layer that's above freezing, and it just turns into plain rain. Usually pretty cold, though. If, however, let's say the temperature outside is 30 degrees, but if you go up a few thousand feet, it's 35, 38, maybe 40 degrees for a little layer. What's going to happen is that snow falls through that warm layer, it melts, and then you'll look outside and you'll see it just raining. But then you'll go out and notice you touch a deck railing or you touch something outside, a barbecue that you have sitting outside, and you'll notice that there's ice on it because it's below freezing. We call that freezing rain. If there's just a little bit of a warm air layer and then there's a few thousand feet of really cold air below it, what can happen is that snow melts back to rain, but then it refreezes into what we call sleet. And I'll show you a picture of sleet on the next slide. So here's a picture that shows you what sleet looks like, and it's very similar to hail. It looks almost like hail. The difference is typically that if you look outside, you'll see that it's bouncing. It can be hard, though, even for a meteorologist, to determine the difference between all of these different winter weather types. And the atmosphere is never, perfectly crystal clear with these things. Often we see a mix of everything. We'll see a mix of sleet and graupel and snow. So graupel is another common precipitation type that we see in the winter. And essentially what it is snowflakes that had extra super cold water droplets on it. So it's almost like snow covered in snow that falls, and it falls as this white crumbly texture. And it's got a pretty distinct look, and sometimes you'll see it mixed in with snow. So you'll look out onto a darker surface and you'll notice this kind of these crumbly looking little snowflakes. They don't look like snowflakes, they're kind of just little balls of ice, but they're soft. Another winter phenomena that we deal with is diamond dust. This is just suspended ice crystals, so not a precipitation type, really, but it is a phenomena that we deal with, and it's common in very cold temperatures. You can notice this in the wintertime because we see what we call light pillars. Or if you look out and you know there's a light source, let's say there's a car dealership or a retail store where there's bright lights in a parking lot, you might look out in the middle of the winter, it's really cold, I'm not talking 0 degrees, I'm talking 10, 20, 30 below zero. If there's enough moisture in the air, the ice will be oriented in a way that when you look at these light sources, like a car dealership or something like that, you'll see pillars of light going into the sky. That's the light from the surface being reflected upwards through the ice in the air. Finally, another term that we use all the time at the National Weather Service is just wintry mix. This is our catch-all term for any and all types of winter precipitation. It might mean rain and snow, it might mean rain or freezing rain, it's going to be really close for the temperature. It's kind of just our catch-all term. So I talked earlier about wet snow. So not all snow is the same, and if you've dealt with snow for many years, you know this. Sometimes we get really nice dry snow, that powder snow that you could almost break out the leaf blower and blow it off your deck and blow it off your driveway. It is really easy to just get out and sweep. It goes away, really dry, not that big of a worry. Then on the other side of things, there's wet snow, or what almost feels like concrete when you're trying to push it. You get a shovel, you push it a few feet, and it feels like you can't push anymore, and it's so heavy. What makes the difference between these types of snow is the moisture content. So we tend to think of snow in terms of its snow to liquid ratio. So a 10 to 1 ratio would mean 10 inches of snow melts down to 1 inch of water. When we get into dry snow, it tends to be really efficient. We see a 20 to 1 or 30 to 1 ratio. When we see wet snow, or we see a mix of rain and snow, we get into these lower ratios. This graph here shows a range of how measurements have gone in Duluth over a really long period of history. And generally, most of our snowfall amounts are somewhere between 10 to 15 to 1. That's kind of what we think of as our normal snowfall ratio. Lake effect snow is typically on the powdery side of things. It's usually really dry snow. It's really efficiently made snow. And so that might have 20 to 1 or higher ratios. Lake effect snow, speaking of, is what happens when we have cold Arctic air going across a relatively warm lake. And I don't say warm like you would want to go swimming in it. When I say warm, I mean something like 36 degrees or 35-degree water temperature. Certainly not something that you want to go in. But relative to the air, it might be pretty darn warm. Usually we need a temperature difference of about 23 degrees Fahrenheit between that water and the air aloft in order to get some good lake effect processes going. When there's a difference in temperature of about 23 degrees or more, that's when we see that warm lake water evaporate off the lake surface into the air, into that cooler and usually drier air. When that happens over a long period of time, so going across a lake, all of the water is kind of evaporating into clouds. Those clouds eventually become full of moisture and they begin to start precipitating out as usually snowfall. This can actually happen on any lake. And this is an example from Upper and Lower Red Lake where we had some lake effect. We call them streamers a lot of times because they kind of go, it's kind of just a downstream little stream of precipitation, or sometimes it's just clouds. But this is from a few years ago where we noticed a plume of these clouds from Upper and Lower Red Lake. So in the fall and the springtime, we can actually see lake effect over some of our other large open lakes, such as Lake Winnie, even Lake Vermilion sometimes, Lake Mille Lacs, of course. Anytime there's enough of a temperature difference and the right amount of kind of light winds going in the right direction, we can see lake effect across inland lakes. Another factor around Lake Superior that we deal with is the steep rise in elevation across the western parts of the lake. And of course across the rest of the South Shore as well. But especially on the north and the South Shores, we see a really steep rise in the terrain. You go from Lake Superior, which is 600 feet above sea level, to a place like Eagle Mountain that's 2,300 feet above sea level. This enhances the precipitation through a process known as orographic lift, or terrain lift. Now, while this is most common in the West, where they have the Rockies and they have big mountains and deep valleys, this also actually happens around Western Lake Superior when it comes to winter precipitation, and often this is a way that we get enhanced amounts of precipitation. We usually see those highest amounts along the higher elevations because of this process. Just to give you an example of what this looks like, this is a vertical profile, and so here's Lake Superior. This up here is Wolf Ridge, ELC, and then over here is Finland. So I'm doing a cross section on the map there. And there's an 800-foot rise in elevation over just about 2 miles there. So it's a really steep rise in terrain. On the South Shore, we also see a similar rise in the terrain, and while it's not extremely steep, it still does rise a pretty darn good amount over about 13 to 15 miles. It rises about 1,000 feet when you get towards the Highway 77 corridor, where we have Montreal, Guile, Hurley, Ironwood. You can see some really heavy snowfall amounts on the South Shore. Now, why this is a steeper, the North Shore has a steeper terrain, but why don't we see more precipitation up there? It's because typically in the winter, we see winds that are out of the north, which tend to favor lake effect along the South Shore. So that's why places along the South Shore see the highest snowfall amounts. Another really cool local effect that we deal with here in Duluth is what we call our gravity wave snowband. Now we have a really unique elevation profile across the region where we have this higher terrain that abruptly drops down to Lake Superior. So what can happen is as the air comes down, it begins to heat up. It compresses as it comes down. And we see this actually in Duluth in the summertime, where if we get the winds out of the west, northwest, we will actually see places like Park Point get warmer than up at the airport. And that's because of this effect that the air warms as it gets forced downwards in the elevation. That warmer air mass wants to then rise And so we often see downwind of the higher elevations, we see this snow band develop. And it's a really cool local effect. It doesn't always appear. It's typically northwest flow, typically after a winter storm has exited. We'll get a few hours where we get this snow band that develops. It usually starts somewhere across Douglas and Bayfield County, and sometimes it shifts. It might shift back to the west a bit, and it might even go as far west as Carleton and Pine counties. It's not a big snow maker. It usually makes a couple extra inches of snow, but it's a really cool local effect that we deal with that we're always watching the radar for. You can also see this effect on satellite imagery. So even when there's no precipitation, the air is still in northwest flow. It's getting forced down the elevation onto Lake Superior, and then that warmer air wants to rise, and that kind of continues. It's like a ball bouncing up and down. It wants to continue to rise and fall as it goes down. We see this on satellite imagery in these ripples. So you see these ripples that look like a potato chip across Lake Superior. That's actually the visualization of this gravity wave. All right, let's talk a little bit about measuring winter weather and how to report it. So to measure snowfall, you're going to need a couple of things. And you don't need everything listed here, but if you can get everything, that's awesome. First of all, you're going to need some way to measure. That's mandatory. You can get a yardstick from most hardware stores. There are wooden yardsticks available. I found this at a local hardware store for less than $1. You can also, for a little bit more, get an aluminum yardstick. These are really nice if you're making a measurement of the snow depth, the snow pack. When you need to kind of break through any icy crust at the top, an aluminum yardstick can be really helpful. And they're usually a little bit easier to see, at least in my opinion. You're going to want a snowboard, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but the snowboard is not anything fancy. There's no technical equipment here. It's just a 2 foot by 2 foot piece of plywood that's painted white. And it doesn't even need to be exactly 2 feet by 2 feet, but generally you want a larger surface that you can put on top of the snow to measure. It also should be painted white because if it's any other color, it can absorb the light from the sun and it can radiate that heat back. So you'll notice in the spring and the fall, especially when it snows on blacktop, it melts right away because that dark surface is warmer from the heat of the sun, as opposed to a cooler surface that's a lighter color. So that snowboard needs to be painted white. You also might want a flag or reflective marker so that if you put your snowboard out in your yard, you can go find it after the storm. And also, if you want to report precipitation for us, we require the use of a standard 4-inch rain gauge that you can get from one of CocoRoss's vendors on their website. So if you go to cocoross.org, I'm going to talk about CocoRoss a little bit in this presentation. If you can get a rain gauge, that's excellent. You don't have to give us the measurements in the winter if you don't want to, but if you want to measure precipitation and rainfall in the summer, this is a great investment. It's not that much, and it ensures that you're using one of the most accurate rain gauges available out there. So where should you measure snowfall? You want to find an open area away from obstructions like trees and buildings. Ideally, you want to try to get out at least twice as far as the nearest obstruction height. However, I know we live in the woods up here. We live in the North Woods. There are a lot of trees. There are a lot of other obstructions on your property. You might not have access to a broad open area. So as an example here, this is, an average Duluth homestead. Just kidding, it's Glensheen. But let's say this was your home and you had to choose where you wanted to measure snow. Where do you think would be a good choice? You could measure maybe on the deck or the patio out back. You could measure out here by the lake, maybe in the middle of the woods, over here by the garden, or maybe over in the parking lot. Now, my choice, I think the best spot overall would probably be this flat area by the garden. And this might be different from whenever this image was taken, what it looks like now, but a nice flat area, you don't have too tall of trees in any direction. You don't have any close buildings that are going to mess you up. This open area by the lake also might not be a bad idea because at least there's not too many trees around. You may get instances where, the wind is blowing in a certain direction and you get some big drifts. So you're going to have to deal with that. But generally, those two areas are a better choice than the other areas. It's really convenient. You might think, can I just measure on my deck? It's, a few feet out the door. Can I do that? The answer is sometimes. Really, no. Meteorologically, to be accurate, you can't just go out and measure on a deck or a patio a few steps away from your home, because you're going to get influence from your home being there, from the building being there. The snow might blow off the roof. There might be weird wind patterns depending on how the wind blows around your home or your building. There can be little swirls, there can be drifts, there can be a lack of snow. If the snow was kind of straight down, if there wasn't a lot of wind and drifting, a measurement on a deck or a nearby patio kind of thing, it might not be the worst. If you do this, make sure that you're measuring from a surface that's at least 2 feet by 2 feet large. So not measuring on a deck railing, that's not a good place to measure. You don't want to measure on a deck railing. But occasionally, sometimes, that might be an okay option to measure on your deck or your patio. Do you always have to measure in the same spot? Not necessarily. And we actually deal with this at our office too. We kind of have a standard spot that we measure out in our in front of our front parking lot. However, sometimes it's really windy and we can't measure in that spot because the wind has blown all of the snow away, and so we need to find some other place to measure. We have kind of a spot in our backyard that it's surrounded by trees, so it's not great, but at least it doesn't suffer the effects from wind. This is an art, it's not a science, and there's going to be times where you have to make an estimate, and that's just okay. When you measure the snow, you can measure 2 different things. One is measuring the snowfall, and that's kind of what we usually want. We want how much snow fell since the last time you measured. You can measure each morning, or you can measure at the end of the storm, or ideally both if you can. But those are kind of the standard times. You can also measure whenever. We are always appreciative of updates, especially when there's a big storm going on. If you can call and say, hey, I just got 4 inches of snow in 2 hours. We love updates like that. And if you're a CocoRoss observer, I'll tell you about a special, really cool way that you can send in updates like that in a minute. So snowfall is measured down to the 1/10 of an inch, so something like 3.4 inches. And I'll talk about a little bit about rulers in a minute. You can also measure the snow depth, or the snowpack. How deep is the snow out there? That we only round to the whole inch of snow, and that's just because there's so much variation. You might walk across your yard and find measurements, of 4 inches, of 8 inches, of an area where there is no snow, it's just grass. There's still some grass there. Or it might be so high that, you can't even fit your yardstick in, it's above the yardstick. So it's going to vary. We always want you to do your best, make a best estimate, and let us know the details of your measurement. If you are, if you had to make an estimate because of the way you measured, because it was super windy and, you're just doing your best, let us know. When it comes to making your snowfall measurement, you want to take a couple of measurements, and ideally on that snowboard. So this is a picture of one of our meteorologists, Brian, making the snowfall measurement out on the snowboard a couple of years ago. You'll notice we have this nice little reflector that helps us find the snowboard. And you'll notice also we're right next to the trees. That's okay. This is kind of the best spot that we found on our property. The best spot on your property is going to depend on where you are and the obstructions around it. And again, sometimes you might need to take a couple of measurements in different places to get an accurate measurement. If you don't have a snowboard, that's okay. Try to make measurements on a couple of different surfaces and be aware of any possible measurement errors. What I mean by that is if there's an area where it often drifts, make sure that you're aware of that so that you're not measuring where it usually drifts. Or if there's an area that the snowplow just dumped a bunch of snow, well, you don't want to measure in the pile of snow there. You want to go measure some fresh snowfall. It's a challenge, but you're going to have to do your best. Once you're done making a snowfall measurement, if you have a snowboard, you're going to clear that snow. And what we do here is we wipe that snow off and we kind of put it back where the snowboard was, and then we put the snowboard right on top. You don't want to do this too often. Either do it once a day or at the end of the storm, but don't clear it too often or you'll get a measurement that's too high. At our office, we actually measure and clear it every 6 hours, but that's because we're staffed 24 hours a day. If we don't expect you to go out and make measurements every 6 hours, just once a day is perfectly fine, or at the end of the storm. But you don't want to clear it too often. Sometimes there can be some weird and wacky things that happen with snowfall that make it a real big challenge to measure. Let's say, especially in the fall and the spring, we have a really strong sun and it snows in the morning, the snow ends in the early afternoon, and then it starts melting, it starts compacting. That settling that occurs is completely normal, and we take that into account. But ideally, if we can get a measurement of how deep the snow was at its highest, that is great. If you can't get that, if you can only get to measure it the next day and it's kind of already settled, that's fine. Just let us know. Tell us, measurement was taken at 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. That's just fine. Sometimes if there's multiple snowfall rounds, so it might snow and then it stops and it might settle a little bit and then it snows more and then it stops and then it stops again and snows and stops. And do your best. If you can certainly get out and measure after it's done snowing, that's a great way to get us an update. And I'll talk about getting us updates on snowfall before the next morning. We definitely appreciate that. But if you can't, if you just make a snowfall the next day, make that the number that you report. Measuring ice is really difficult, but you can do it, and it's so helpful for us to understand the impacts of ice. Our radar sees precipitation, but it definitely does not see when there's ice, let alone how much ice is accumulating on a surface. Only you that are on the ground can tell us that. This ice kind of varies in addition to where exactly precipitation is falling. Just slight differences in elevation can cause really drastic differences in how much ice there is. And don't assume that we know about these a half-inch of ice on tree branches that are out of your property. We might not know that that's going on because you live in a unique place. When you're reporting ice, there's two options. You can either report flat ice or radial ice. So flat ice is just what it sounds like. It's a flat ice on a surface. Let us know what you measured it on. Usually a deck railing is a good spot. Any kind of patio furniture is nice. As long as it's straight, flat, you can measure how deep it is. Radial ice is when you measure around a branch or some other kind of small pole surface. Typically, though, it's a branch. You let us know. We like to know how much ice is on there. And let me go into a little bit more detail about these two measurements. So for a flat ice measurement, you want to find an elevated surface. Maybe you have a little patio furniture set outside that you use because you're a hardy Minnesotan or hardy Wisconsinite and you still eat outdoors in the winter. Doesn't stop you. Maybe you have a nice Adirondack chair or something out there where you can measure the ice on a surface or some other kind of surface. What you want to do is you want to measure how deep that ice is relative to the surface and measure it to the 10th of the inch. I said I was going to talk about rulers, so you probably don't have 10th or 100th marks on the ruler that you have. It's probably 8th or 16th marks, and that's okay. That's normal. Most rulers, most yardsticks that you can get are just 8th and 16th marks. If you can tell us the detail, if you've got 3/16 of an inch of ice out there on your deck, excellent. We love that detail. We're going to have to round it to the 10th of an inch to put it into our software, but we still appreciate that level of detail. If you can, repeat it on a couple of other surfaces because the ice may have, for instance, it may have accumulated deeper on, let's say, a metal surface because it was colder than a plastic surface because it was a little bit warmer. And finally, don't forget to report it to us. And the more details you can give us, the better, including pictures. Those are great. When it comes to making a radial ice measurement, you want to measure how much ice is on a branch. So don't tell us that the branch is an inch big and then there's some ice on it. That doesn't help us. Let us know how much ice is there on there. And sometimes the ice is not even, so you might need to take an average. So up here, let's say on the top of the branch, there's 1/10 of an inch. The bottom of the branch, there's about 3/10 of an inch. Take an average of that and you would report about 2/10 of an inch. If it's too small to measure, just say that you've got a glaze of ice. Too small to measure. When you report to us, there's two options. The best option, if you want to report precipitation to us on a regular basis, is to join CocoRa's. You can enter your report on the website or in the app, and it gets to us immediately. When you're a CocoRa's reporter, you just send your report into CocoRa's, and we take care of the rest. If you don't want to report on CocoRa's, if you're not interested in joining, that's okay too. We also have an online report form, and this is definitely the way in the wintertime. This is a great way to get your reports in, and I'll step you through how to do a report like that later on in this presentation. You can also email us reports, send us your reports and pictures on social media, or you can also give us a phone. We are open and available 24/7. That's our phone number there. When it comes to winter weather reporting tips, stay safe. Don't take any unnecessary risks to make snowfall or ice measurements for us. An estimate is going to be better than no report at all, but make sure you tell us that it's an estimate. It's okay if you get out there and say, hey, I was gone for a week, I just came back home, and I've got, looks like 14 inches since the last time it snowed here. That's okay. We can still use that information, and we appreciate it. but let us know if it's an estimate or it's different than a normal quality observation. We're always happy to help if you do have any questions, and we appreciate each and every report. So thank you for taking your time to voluntarily go out in the snow, go outside in winter, and make these measurements and reports to us. We really appreciate it. Again, CocoRa's is an awesome program. What it is it's a nonprofit organization that's sponsored by NOAA. And I know we are a border office with Canada. If you're a Canadian and you want to join, you are also welcome to join CocoRa's. It is available in Canada as well as the US. There is a standard equipment and reporting time used, so using a snowboard is recommended. And if you want to report rain, you must use this special CocoRa's rain gauge. It's really easy to send in your reports daily. You can use an app or you can use the website. And your reports are used well beyond our office. When you call and just let us know that you had 3 inches of snow, that's great, but we only kind of put it in a few places. If you join CocoRa's, you're creating a long-term record of history of weather for your exact location so that we can go back. And if you report every single day, we can go back years if you continue to regularly report, and we can look back and say, how much snow did you have last season? Or when that storm came through, what did you end up getting? It is a really cool program. It's open for all ages. If you have a child that's really interested in weather, if you are maybe retired and you're just interested in the weather, it's a really great program. There's no obligation. You can join, you can report once and decide it's not for you. You can also report just when it snows, and that's it. And that's perfectly fine. We appreciate anyone that's part of CocoRa's because those reports go to a lot of places and it's really helpful for us. We also have training and help available. On the handout document is Steve Godey's email address. Steve is our local observation program leader and CocoRa's coordinator for the region. If you want to be a CocoRa's observer but you have some questions, ask Steve, and he would be more than happy to help. He can also help with things like, well, where should I put my snowboard, and where's the best place to mount the rain gauge? This is a map of all of our CocoRa's observers. Blue are active, gray are people that are not active at the moment, but maybe if you are one of those gray dots, you're watching this and you're going to say, I want to sign up, I want to start reporting again. Definitely, we really appreciate if you are a CocoRa's observer, and we again, that is available both in the US and Canada, so there are some observers up in Thunder Bay. If you know anyone in a place where we don't have any of these blue dots, like Coochiching County or some parts of Cass and Crow Wing County and Itasca County and Cook County up here and Lake County, lots of different places would be really nice to get more observers. So if you know someone that lives in a rural area, they like weather, they would be interested in doing this, tell them about CocoRa's, send them to us. We'd love to get them as part of the program. All right, so little tips for keeping up with the forecast. So the National Weather Service issues all of these products. We call them headlines, but they're just different products. A statement is usually an FYI, some kind of localized or minor weather issue going on. An advisory is kind of the lowest end product that we issue for minor disruptions that are expected. So we issue winter weather advisories when there's some snow, and we encourage you to use caution. It's not usually life-threatening, or it's not a really long period of dangerous conditions. When there is life-threatening conditions expected, we will issue a watch and a warning. We will issue a watch if we think warning conditions are possible soon, and then that's followed up by a warning when life-threatening conditions are likely. A watch is always before issuing a warning, though there doesn't always have to be a watch before a warning. Sometimes things change and we decide to just issue the warning. Sometimes we issue a watch and the forecast doesn't pan out. Maybe the storm track moves and we just don't issue anything. These are good products to pay attention to, though, because the watch is your heads up that you need to get ready. There could be a big storm. A warning you should take as this is your last minute warning. The storm is coming or it's already started, and life-threatening conditions are possible. There's been a lot of confusion around the advisory, watch, and warning terms, and so the National Weather Service is thinking maybe possibly getting rid of the advisory term. We did some surveys over the summer, and an announcement about that will be coming out later this winter. When it comes to the winter weather hazards the National Weather Service issues, for our Duluth office, these are the winter hazards that we issue warnings and advisories for and the thresholds that we use. So for a winter storm warning, we need about 6 inches in 12 hours or 8 inches in 24 hours to issue a warning. And this is actually the same threshold for most of the Midwest. We issue about 8 to 10 of those a year, but there's a caveat to that. I'll show you a map in a minute. Winter storm warnings can be issued for those snowfall amounts, or it can be issued for a combination of wind-driven snow, sleet, freezing rain, or a mixture of everything. A blizzard warning is issued when we have sustained winds or frequent gusts of 35 miles an hour or greater and visibility less than a quarter mile due to falling or blowing snow for greater than 3 hours. The thing to know about a blizzard warning is it doesn't always have to be snowing for it to be a blizzard. Sometimes it's just blowing snow. Ice storm warnings are extremely rare, and those are issued for cases where we see ice accumulation from freezing rain of over a quarter inch or greater. And I'll talk about wind chills in a minute here on another slide. Winter weather advisories, this is the most common product. And we can issue this for it's our catch-all term. Any kind of winter hazards, snow, a mix of snow, a little bit of freezing rain, but not a lot, blowing snow, any kind of winter hazards that we think are going to pose a hazard to you, be a nuisance, we will issue a winter weather advisory. Generally for snowfall, our threshold is about 3 to 5 inches in 12 hours or 5 to 7 in 24. But for all of these products, our forecasters can deviate from these thresholds. So if we think that the impacts are going to be higher, let's say we're only going to get 2 inches of snow, but it's going to happen right during a Tuesday morning commute, and we think it's going to make travel really hazardous, we might issue an advisory anyway, even though it doesn't meet that threshold. For the Twin Ports, and for most of the Northland, we tend to see about 10 to 12 winter weather advisories a year, though it does vary. Most often it's near the lake, but where areas away from the lake do see somewhere around 8 to 10 winter weather advisories each year. Winter storm warnings, shown on this map on the right, we tend to see about 3 to 5 of those a year, and again, they're most frequent along the lake. Now, years ago, the National Weather Service did issue special lake effect winter storm warnings, lake effect snow warnings. We do not issue those anymore. We just now issue a winter storm warning because it was just simpler. So we will probably see those statistics go up in time, that those lake effect areas, especially North Shore and then especially on the South Shore, Ashland and Iron County, where we see the most lake effect snow, that's going to be the most frequent areas that we issue winter storm warnings. So wind chills. Wind chills are issued when we have wind chills of 25 below or colder. For a wind chill advisory, it's 25 below to 40 below, which roughly corresponds to a frostbite time of 15 to 30 minutes. Frostbite time means how many minutes it's going to take for exposed skin to be at risk for getting frostbite. Wind chill advisories are really common. We tend to issue about 10 to 12 of those each year. A wind chill warning is for when the wind chill gets down to 40 below or colder. While it might seem like, well, we always get winter, it always gets cold here in the winter. Wind chill warnings are actually not that common. Some winters we do not issue any wind chill warnings. These are for extreme conditions when we see frostbite times getting into the 10-minute or less category. Now you might notice, if you've been around the Northland for a while, back in 2001 we actually came out with this new wind chill chart. Before that we used a different chart and the numbers were different, and they're kind of not comparable from before then. This wind chill chart was made using essentially college students that they took on treadmills and exposed them to windy and cold conditions until they developed frostbite. And so the numbers that are on here, the frostbite times, those are fairly scientific. They're proven in adults of what it takes in terms of cold and wind for you to get frostbite. Snow squall warning is something that's new. It's a new product as of last winter, and it's going to be something that's actually pretty rare. But I want to make sure that you know about it, you know what this is, so that when we do issue a snow squall warning, you're prepared. So what is it? So a snow squall is defined as a short period of time, again short, it's really brief, 30 to 60 minutes at most, where we get a rapid reduction in visibility due to snow, and we have sub-freezing road temperatures. In an otherwise benign weather conditions, like a sunny day. It's a beautiful sunny day in February, and there's some snow showers around. We issue these snow squall warnings now because that combination of near zero visibility combined with road temperatures that are cold or rapidly falling can cause roads to really quickly go from clear and easy to becoming snow-packed and icy. The sudden onset of these conditions can cause really dangerous multi-vehicle crashes. It's not like when we have a winter storm warning, everybody knows that it's coming, it kind of comes on gradually, and it doesn't hit anybody with surprise. A snow squall warning isn't going to happen to everyone, and it usually will not happen with much warning. We're monitoring the radar, monitoring road cameras and other weather stations, and we see these conditions develop. They're only going to be issued for a small geographic area, and again, a short amount of time. It's almost like a tornado warning, but for the quick onset of dangerous, nearly blizzard-like conditions. These won't be issued if there's a winter storm warning or a blizzard warning already in effect, and it's unlikely that we'll issue them an advisory. Again, the thing to remember here is that it's a sudden onset of dangerous conditions. It's like a sudden blizzard that has developed, and we are advising you to either don't go on the road if you are thinking about heading out, or if you're on the road to pull over and wait it out. These will actually go out much like a tornado warning and tone alert the weather radios. Weather radios will go off, and these also go out to your cell phone via the wireless emergency alerts system. This is what one looks like. We actually issued one back in April. And you can see here from the road cameras and then the park point camera down here, visibility quickly within the span of minutes went down to nothing, and then afterwards they improved. It was a short period where we had really intense snowfall rates, and while there wasn't much snow, these typically don't bring a lot of snow. It's going to bring less than an inch or maybe 2 inches at most of snowfall. The rapid onset and the cold road temperatures can cause roads to get really dangerous really quickly. This is an example too of what the polygon that we issued looked like. So you can see it's a small area that we issued it, much like a tornado warning. When it comes to staying up to date, before, during, and after the storm, there's a couple of places that we encourage you to visit. First is our website, weather.gov/Duluth, where you can find a ton of information. At the top right of our website, if there's a storm coming up, you'll find our situation report, and that's going to be like a PDF briefing with information and maps with details about the forecast. If you click on the map or you enter your zip code here at the top left, you can find your official forecast with the hour-by-hour details. And down here at the bottom left is our weather story graphics. We'll publish different graphics depending on the weather hazard coming up. That'll have more information. It'll have snow maps. It'll have some information after the storm with reports. Before, it'll have preparedness reminders, all that sort of great stuff. You can also follow us on social media. We're active on Facebook and Twitter. We're at NWS Duluth on Twitter. And we post a lot of great updates on there where you can ask us questions and interact with us. If you want the really most frequent updates, definitely follow us on Twitter. And make sure if you like us on Facebook that you tell your friends and family about our page too. Another great place for information is going to be our local media, TV, newspaper, radio, social media accounts, and apps from, again, local media. You want to turn to a trusted source when it comes to local weather information. The meteorologists at our local TV stations and the meteorologists at the National Weather Service in Duluth, we're focused on the weather here. We know the weather here. This is all we do. Don't turn to any kind of sources of misinformation, and I'll give you some examples of this in a minute. So, reliable sources, NOAA and the National Weather Service, are local media outlets. There's also national media outlets that are trustworthy that you could use. And reliable apps. So check App Store reviews, check reviews online, look for information about apps that are trustworthy and that your friends use. Things that might not be a good source for weather is maybe some Facebook page or Twitter account that has some crazy sounding name and it posts in all caps and you don't even know who's behind it. Is it actually a meteorologist running this account? And who is it? Where are you? There are accounts out there that will post images of snow maps and say, oh, Duluth is going to get 80 inches of snow. And wait, what? Hold on. I don't know if that's going to happen. Check with this. Check with us at the National Weather Service. Check with the local media outlets. We're going to have the best and latest information when it comes to winter weather. Another possible, source of weather information that might not be the best is a local media source that isn't local. So let's say, a TV station in Alabama posts a snow map of Minnesota saying, wow, Minnesota is going to get 40 inches of snow with this upcoming storm. And you check our forecast and we're calling for 3 inches. That local station might have just found some computer model that they posted and said, wow, that's crazy. We're not just looking at one model. We're not just looking at one run of one model. we're looking at dozens of different computer models. We're integrating the expertise of our neighboring offices, of national weather centers that we use. It's a huge collaborative forecast process. We bring in a lot of experts, a lot of expertise, a lot of our local knowledge to make the best forecast for you. So it's very important that you use reliable weather sources to get your information. One of the new ways that we have to visualize our forecast is this forecast points site. And there's a link to this in the handout document that you'll find. It's weather.gov/forecast points. It's a really cool way to visualize our forecast. And it's the same forecast that you find on our website. It is experimental, so sometimes it might be broken, it might not work, but it's a cool way to kind of get a little table of what the expected conditions are for the next week. You can get an hour-by-hour graph of details. I really like this table because you can scroll, you can get the snowfall amounts and rainfall amounts and wind information, really cool. And it's got these cool graphs to show you how the temperature is going to change hour by hour. Another new thing that we have, another new tool to kind of communicate the severity of our storms is this thing called the Winter Storm Severity Index. It combines our forecast and climatology, so our normal amount of snowfall, to kind of make it a expected level of impacts based on all of this information. And it's more sophisticated than just saying, okay, everybody's going to get 10 inches. Well, it's not going to happen in the same way. It might happen, there might be snowfall rates that are heavier in certain parts of the area than others. And also depending on the time of year, if you get 10 inches in November, the impacts are a little different than getting 10 inches in January. And same thing, if you get a foot of snow over, a day versus a foot of snow in 6 hours, the impacts are a lot different. So the Winter Storm Severity Index kind of tries to convey this. And again, there's a link in the handout document to viewing the Winter Storm Severity Index. It can really help us depict where you're going to have, a typical winter storm versus a historic or extreme storm, because those impacts can vary across the region. It's something that you might see in our graphics and our situation reports and our social media as we go through the winter. Another new kind of advanced tool, this is still experimental, but what we call our snowfall probabilities. So this is, it uses our forecast, it uses 60 plus different weather models out there. It has high and low end amounts. You can find probabilities for different thresholds. So you can see like a map or a number for your city of, what's the chance of 6 inches or 8 inches of snow for this upcoming storm. We're still experimenting with how to communicate this. There's an ongoing experiment this winter at a couple of National Weather Service offices to how do we visualize all of this information? How do we tell you the forecast? Because sometimes we don't know exactly how much snowfall is going to fall. And there's some variability. How do we best communicate that to you? So you might see some of these maps on our website going forward, and there's actually a page on our site in the handout with this advanced snowfall probability information if you're interested. During the winter storm, during any winter storm, monitor our website and social media for the latest updates. You should also monitor local media such as, again, TV, newspaper, radio, social media, and apps. And for the road conditions, check 511. Minnesota and Wisconsin both have great 511 sites, and on the Minnesota site, you can not only see the road conditions, you can also see live road cameras. You can even see the pictures from the plow cameras. It's really cool information. We've made a lot of improvements to these sites in recent years, and definitely encourage you, if you're going to head out, you got to head out when it's snowing, check these websites for the latest information. During the storm, you can also report the precipitation type to us using the MPing app. And I've got a QR code on there. If you pause this video real quick and hold up your phone's camera, you should have a link to download that app from your local app store. So this is an app that you can use to give us whether it's raining or it's snowing or it's mixed or it's nothing. You can report none. You can report test if you want to do a little test. It's a really cool app. It's only for reporting the current precipitation type. So it only works right now. You make your report and that's it. And you can report as often as you like. So you're looking outside, it just changed to snow from rain. You can open up the MPing app and let us know. When you send in your report, we instantly see it at the National Weather Service office, and we really appreciate it. Again, it's only for kind of what's falling right now. It's not for sending in your measurements. During the storm, if you're a CoCoRaHS observer, you can send us a special update of how much you've measured using the significant weather reporting form. And there's a handout document on our website that has a little bit more information about how this works on the website. But essentially, you go on the CoCoRaHS website, You can enter in a significant weather report to let us know, hey, we just got 4 inches in 2 minutes. Not something like that, but maybe 4 inches in 2 hours. These kind of updates will get sent directly to the National Weather Service immediately, and these are really helpful for us. If there's a big storm going on and you can let us know, hey, just wanted to let you know I just had my first 6 inches from the storm, not looking forward to the next 6. This is a great way to get that report to us. You can add some comments in. It's great. It's perfect for giving us a snowfall measurement during a storm. If you're not a CoCoRaHS observer, you can certainly still send us updates through our online form or through social media as well. After the storm, let us know what fell. Let us know your snowfall and ice measurements and any damage from the winter storm using whatever method works for you. If you're not a CoCoRaHS observer, I encourage you to use our online form, and I'll show you what that looks like here in a minute. You can also tell us on social media, or phone call, or email, whatever works best for you. If you have any photos, we always appreciate getting them because that really helps us tell the story. And the more details, the more we're going to trust your report. If you just say I've got 8 inches and we think, well, that doesn't make any sense. You should have like 3, not 8. We might ask back with a little bit more details about that. So if you can tell us, hey, I made a measurement, but this snow actually ended 12 hours ago, so this might be a little low or something like that. Any kind of details you can add are great. If you're a CoCoRaHS observer, enter those measurements in the app or on the website around 7 a.m. each morning, or if you want to send an update, you can also use the significant event report form. The online form, if you're not a CoCoRaHS observer, is a really cool way to get your reports to us. It's really easy. You go to the website, it's linked on the handout document. You can just choose what you're reporting, so snowfall. Type in how much you're reporting, and if this is a late report, you can change the time on here if you'd like. You can let us know if you're estimating, measuring, or if you don't have a reading, you just wanted to share some kind of details. Put in some details here. Again, the more details, the better. Let us know where you are, and if you're on a phone, you can actually just tap Use My Device's location, and it'll find you on the map. You can also just enter your address in. And then you'll see a preview of your report and a space to enter in your name and any contact information. We really appreciate it if you can share your phone or email address with us, because then we can follow up with you if we have any questions. After the storm, you can find all of our snowfall reports on our snowfall report map, and there's a link to this in the handout. This will show you, it'll be a little dot for every single weather report, and it's color-coded. If you're a CoCoRaHS reporter, you're going to see your reports automatically show up on here as well. Now, it's not instant. We do quality control of your reports, so it might take some time after the morning after a storm for it to be on there, but we use your reports, and your CoCoRaHS reports get automatically ingested into our software. You can also find a snowfall analysis map. This is really cool. There's both kind of a basic version and an advanced version available, and this will kind of show you what happened, what we think happened in between where we got the reports. So if we get a report from 2 different places, we make an estimate of what probably happened in between that, using your reports and some other information. All right, so we're just about done here. Let's do a final review. Number 1, be prepared for winter. Make sure that you're ready in your home and your vehicle now. Number 2, be informed. Know where to find the latest forecast information and know where to find the latest reliable forecast information. That forecast is always going to change over time. We update our forecast constantly, and so you should make sure that you're always looking at the latest information. Sometimes social media shows you an old post or you see an old news article. Go check the latest, know where to find the latest information. And if you see a friend or family maybe sharing a bad forecast or just an old one, help them find the latest information from us. Finally, if you can, report your measurements to us. If you'd like to report for CoCoRaHS, we really appreciate it, and we love our CoCoRaHS reporters. If you're not interested in that, that's okay. You can still share your reports with the National Weather Service using our online report form or by calling or sending us an email or sending us a message on social media. And anyone is welcome to use that free MPing app to report the current precipitation type. We love the MPing app reports. Anytime we have some mixed precipitation, when we have snow and rain and freezing rain, that helps us know what's falling and if it's even falling, because you can also even report none on that app. That's all I have for this presentation. Thank you for watching. Again, definitely check out that handout document for more information and some other tips for winter weather reporting. If you have any questions, you are more than welcome to email me. I am joseph.moore@noaa.gov, and you can also contact our office anytime. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.